C.T. Vivian and John Lewis did likewise. All demonstrated that our work is never done. So as we approach November 3rd, remember the words of the late John Lewis, a soldier of freedom from the age of 19 to the age of 80. Our vote is our voice. We must never be silent. Join with AME Alert as we tell others that voting does make a difference. Go to www.ame-alert.org for a step-by-step process on mobilizing voters, on educating persons to vote, and on voter registration. My name is Clement W. Few, presiding bishop of the 5th Episcopal District, and I approve this message.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the latest edition of the TCR Dialogues. I am your host, Chuck Hobbs, and this afternoon so far I have a dear friend of the show and of mine, political strategist, Mr. Antjuan Seawright. We anticipate being joined within the hour by Democratic House Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn. He is delayed right now due to taking care of all of the work in the People's House up in Congress. But right now, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Antjuan Seawright. Good afternoon, brother.
Thank you, Chuck, and always good to be with you. And shout out to all of our AME leadership from the top to the parking lot. And I cannot forget to give my love and affection to the 9th Episcopal District and my uncle, Bishop Harry L. Seawright, and my aunt, Supervisor Sharita Moon Seawright.
Absolutely. And likewise, I will do the same. Reverend Julius McAllister is my pastor here at the Bethel AME Church in Tallahassee, Florida. And as always, give a shout out to the great Bishop Adam Jefferson Richardson. With that, Brother Seawright, hey, we've got less than a week before Election Day. It's exciting. It's like, you know, when I was younger, Christmas used to get this kind of excitement. When you get around December 16th, 17th, you're anticipating, if you've been a good boy or girl, all of the things that Santa Claus, or later when you got a little older, your parents were going to bring. But this is our Christmas now. It's election season. What are you seeing? What are you feeling with 6 days left before the decision is made across the country?
Well, Chuck, here's the good news. There are no redos and there are no undos when it comes to election. The even better news is that there's a sense of urgency and a real emergency around this election that I have not seen or felt before in my political lifetime. And I say that living through the 2008 and 2012 historic elections and re-elections of Barack Obama. Here's what I think people understand. I think people understand that, yes, this election is important. Yes, this election is consequential, as it has been described as the most consequential since 1860 or most of our political lifetime. But I think Black people realize that this elections mean life or death. Karen Bass, a dear friend of the AME Church, said it best. She said several months ago that Black people will be casting a survival vote in this election. And whoever wins in November 3rd, up and down the ballot, will determine whether communities live or die, whether families live or die, and whether people live or die based on the decisions they will have to make, particularly around this pandemic, the worst pandemic since 1918 that's caused some of the worst economic challenges since 1932, along with the social unrest we are experiencing in this country like we have not seen before in the past 40 years or so.
Yes, sir. Brother Seawright, you are a political strategist. And one of the things I'd like to ask you is, in what ways does this year's election mirror 2016? And in what ways is this year different than what happened back in 2016? I remember about 5 or 6 days out believing that Hillary Clinton was going to win and win going away. Many of the polls had her up as much as by 12, 13 percentage points over the course of the last 2 weeks. And I will say that I was in shock, and I rarely am shocked, but I was shocked on election night when I realized that she was not going to be able to win. What are you seeing in that regards? Can you compare and contrast 2020 to 2016?
Well, I'll say this, and the congressman should be getting on shortly. I'll say this. I have, Chuck, political PTSD this election cycle based on what happened in 2016, because most of us, including Republicans I know, felt as if Democrats were going to win up and down the ballot in this country and make history, because it would be the first time that a woman was a major party nominee, and she would have been the first female president of these United States. And so, how does it compare? It compares this way: the stakes are high, if not higher, than they were in 2016. The Republicans' effort to suppress our vote, particularly the votes of people who look like me and you, are even higher than they were in 2016. The same issues that were important in 2016, quality of life issues that will impact generations of people who look like us, those things are still on the table. And the same strategies and tactics used by Donald Trump, in particular his rhetoric, his language, and so forth, those things are on repeat. So there's some differences, and then there are some things that are different. Here's the big difference. The party, the team who wins this election will perhaps make decisions that will impact this country for the next 50 or 60 years based on judicial appointments that will be made, and also based on some of the legislative agenda items that will be dealt with in this upcoming post-November 3rd.
Very good. And as we're continuing to get Congressman Clyburn on the air right now, we would encourage each of our viewers to go ahead and drop your name as well as your home church and district into the chat. And if you have any questions that you would like posed, feel free to ask them. With that, Brother Seawright, as we continue to hold for the congressman.
Well, he's backstage apparently, so he's waiting.
Okay, very good. We'll sit tight.
There you are.
Here we go. Good afternoon, Representative Clyburn. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you very well. I've been listening to you for quite a while.
All right. Well,
delayed but not denied, Mr. Whip. Delayed but not denied. The AME way.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yes, sir. It's a blessing to have you on. And Brother Seawright was giving our audience pretty much his concerns or his viewpoint in terms of in what ways the 2016 election was similar or dissimilar from 2020. Congressman Clyburn, with only 6 days left in this year's election, what have you seen that is similar, or why should Democrats be excited and think that Joe Biden will actually be able to do what many of us were disappointed about 4 years ago when Hillary Clinton was not able to win the presidency?
Well, I agree with everything that Antjuan has said about that. I will add this, though. I think that what happened 4 years ago is that people began, as if I might use some sports analogies here, is spiking the ball. And a lot of times when you're in wide open space and you see the goal line in front of you, nothing is between you and the goal line, and there's a lot of distance between you and the guy that's chasing you down. I've seen them spike the ball before they get to the goal line. And I think that's what happened. In fact, I know that's what happened. I was in Wisconsin before that election the last time. And I went to get out the vote centers when nobody was doing any attempt to get out the vote. 50 or 60 people sitting around burnishing their resumes rather than on the phone turning the vote out. And so that happened before. I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think that people understand that we've got to run through the tape, as my daughter would say. And so that's the difference this time. But everything else is similar. Everything else is similar. The way we finish, it will be the difference.
Understood.
Chuck, this will be the first election, at least in my lifetime, where we've had to vote in the middle of a pandemic, which means this is the first election by which we do not do what most would describe as traditional high touch when it comes to showing up in person to worship services and so forth. But that does not mean the Black church, and particularly the AME Church, will not shape the outcome of this election. You know, I said to a reporter earlier today, if it is to be, leave it up to the AMEs. We have always been engaged and involved in shaping what the political experience looks like in this country. And I think this election, just like in 2016, will not make a difference. Keep in mind, in 2016, it was the first election, at least in my lifetime, where the African American turnout dropped off. What I think people feel and see now is that we cannot take any days off, because what Republicans have figured out is the people who participate the least are impacted the most. And that's why we have to do everything we can at things like this to make sure all of our churches are adopting precincts, turning out voters, even if they're doing virtual services, allowing candidates to come on, greet the congregation, send videos, as Mr. Clyburn has done all around this country, but talk about the need for the Black church being the nerve center of our community to drive out turnout when it comes to our community.
Absolutely. And I can vouch for that. Even here in Tallahassee, Bethel AME is centered right on the south side of Tallahassee near Florida A&M University, predominantly Black area. And Reverend McAllister, for the number of years that he has been our pastor, has been at the vanguard of making sure we do the souls to the polls. And it's going to be interesting as we head down the home stretch to see how that will look based upon social distancing, mask wearing, and things of that nature. But I do know that people are motivated and want to go. And with that in mind, gentlemen, I want to segue to the next question, which is, with the turnout that both of you have described being already at record numbers across the country and definitely in our native South, how much concern do you have that voter suppression might come into play? Again, y'all know I'm down here in Florida. Florida seemingly can never get elections right. I mean, dating back to Bush v. Gore in 2000, every single election, there seems to be something that goes awry. So we're just waiting down here to see what will it be this time. But what are your thoughts about voter suppression tactics, either be it overt voter suppression or even the more latent types of voter suppression tactics that we have seen from time to time over the last 20 years?
Well, voter suppression is alive and well all over. The only difference now is that they're doing it out in the open. This president has made no secret of the fact, and he said it. If they vote, we lose. We don't want a lot of people to vote. If there's a big voter turnout, we're going to lose. That's why we got to make it a big voter turnout. And so they know the deal, and they aren't hiding it. You know, look what they're doing to the post offices. I don't understand. The thing that really I'm having a real problem with is that we see this. Here's a guy telling you that he's trying to deny you the right to vote. We see what the Supreme Court did 7 years ago now. This is the first time we've had an election without the protection of a Voting Rights Act since 1964. The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. But for the Voting Rights Act, I would not be sitting in Congress today. And then another 30 African Americans would not be in Congress today, but for the Voting Rights Act. 3 of them are right there in Florida. You know, I'm saying 3 because it could very well, if you count them all, could very well be more. You got Val, you got Alcee. Now Val's district came along later, but the district that Frederica Wilson has, the district that Al Harrison's got, and the one that Al Lawson got. Those 3 districts came about because of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And Val Demings that district was created later. So the question is very clear there, that this election is being held without the protection of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. First time since 1964. And so that'll tell you what is at work here. And the Supreme Court knew that. When that decision was written by Chief Justice Roberts, he knew exactly what he was doing. It was not accidental. And I've said, and I said it earlier today on a TV program that I was doing, that was, to me, the worst decision for Black people since Dred Scott. I believe that sincerely, because that has the same impact on the voting that the Dred Scott decision had on the freedoms. And so they're open, and what we've got to do, we got to turn out big votes. You saw what the Supreme Court just did up in Pennsylvania. It was a 4-4 decision. If there were a fifth person on that court, especially the one that was just nominated, they would have taken those votes away up there in I'm saying Virginia, it's in Pennsylvania. Don't want to count the votes. You know,
Right.
if you tell people you got until 5 o'clock the day before the election to put your ballot in the mail, how can you say to them then that if you don't receive your ballot before the polls close on election day, the ballot won't count? So when you undermining the post office and then keeping a vote that's more than a day old from counting, that's voter suppression in the wide open space. So what we've got to do is show up in big numbers. That's why we've been asking people, vote early in person. Do it safely, but do it in person. And that's what we're asking churches and synagogues and temples and mosques to do. That's what we're asking the Divine Nine to do, Masonic temples. Vote early in person, because the mail cannot be trusted in this campaign. We have got to win this election by the time polls close on November 3rd, or there'll be a lot of shenanigans taking place, and it'll be worse than Bush v. Gore.
I have some of those same concerns. And what has been interesting to me, gentlemen, is the concept that throughout most of my adult life watching politics, that the Republican Party has always been one that has championed the concept of mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, and it has been almost a paradigm shift this year to see President Trump, as well as many of his colleagues in the Senate and in the House, already casting aspersions about a system that Republicans traditionally depend upon in regards to absentee votes. And so that too gave me pause for concern earlier this year with regards to, well, what is the end game? What is the play if this is a traditional Republican encouraging point, which is we want you all to vote absentee and avoid the long lines. And now they're saying, well, the mail system is corrupt and the ballots might not be counted correctly. It all leads to the concept of trying to delegitimize the potential results come next week. Brother Seawright, what are your thoughts with regards to suppression?
Well, let me step back for a second and let me thank the boss for his intervention in the Democratic primary, because had he not endorsed Joe Biden in South Carolina and changed the course of history, I'm not sure we would see the enthusiasm, the surge. I'm not sure Kamala Harris would be on the ballot as the vice president's nominee. I'm not sure some of the climate we are experiencing in this country would be had he not intervened in the Democratic primary. And I cannot personally say thank you enough for what he did to change the course of history. Secondly, I'll say he talked about the Supreme Court decision of 2013. It's a friendly reminder that in every election, the courts are on the ballot in some way, shape, or form. Had we had control at some point and was able to do what we need to do in terms of appointments and confirmations to the Supreme Court, perhaps history would tell us a different story today. Thirdly, I'll remind people, if our vote did not matter, they would not be trying to take it away. When I say take away, not just limit it, but literally eliminating our participation, whether it's a poll tax in Florida, voter purging in Georgia, in South Carolina, a witness requirement to absentee ballot, in Michigan, robocalls to low propensity voters, in North Carolina, the rejection of by a +2 margin of African American ballots who were early voting, the closing down of precincts, relocating precincts, long lines, not enough machines. All these things are real, and they're getting creative about what they've been doing for a very long time. And so we cannot afford to take anything for granted. I appreciate Jim Clyburn and the DCCC for the early investments we've made. Millions of dollars invested in filing lawsuits all over the country, including places like South Carolina and Texas when it comes to registration. And now that has helped, I think, what we see the numbers when it comes to participation. Now the next step for us is to over participate. We have to apply the old Southern Carpenters rule to our participation. Measure twice and cut once. Don't take anything for granted. Show up, show out, vote early. And if you have questions, ask questions. Don't make the assumption because you get turned around at the polls for whatever reason that your vote cannot count and will not count. And make no mistake, if we wait till election day, there will be strategies and tactics used to suppress our vote and intimidate us about voting. And I think we have to be mindful of that. As Barbara Lee would say, Representative Barbara Lee, we have to be woke about all of this and know that our vote will decide, have a large say so in what happens in this country for the next 10 years or so. Because we can talk about the African American agenda all we want. We can talk about healthcare. We can talk about education, infrastructure. We can talk about all those things. But if we do not govern, we will not win. And losers have never legislated in this country. And that's part of the reason why we're in the posture we're in. Can't get a stimulus bill, can't get some of the things done because we do not have control of the U.S. Senate in order to get some of these bills out of the gate.
Understood. And with that, both of you gentlemen brought up the recent Supreme Court decision in Pennsylvania with regards to the ballots being counted if they come in after November the 3rd, which traditionally they are across the country. With that in mind, I want to jump around on some of the questions that we discussed beforehand. I want to go to, I want to ask you this. Both Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris, in my opinion, have quite deftly avoided answering the question from the media and from their opponents, Mike Pence and Donald Trump, with regards to, will you pack the courts? I actually like to use the phrase, and I think I stole this from you, Congressman Clyburn, balance the courts when we talked the last time in regards to maybe if there is a Biden administration come January 20th, proposing and seeing pushed through Congress the possibility of extending the Supreme Court justices from 9 to potentially as many as 13 new justices. What are your thoughts on that? I want to start with Congressman Clyburn first. Is that something that a Biden administration should focus on within the first term, trying to balance out the ideological divide on the United States Supreme Court?
No, it should not focus on it, but I don't know that it's not anything that you ought to consider if that seems to be what people in the country would like to see. I don't have any real strong feelings about that at all. As you know, I used to teach history. I studied a lot, and I know that Franklin Roosevelt tried to do that. He tried to expand the court when he was being denied things he wanted to do to get the economy going again. Of course, he got a lot of things through regarding the so-called New Deal, but he didn't get that one through. So I don't know that that's anything he ought to focus on. But certainly, you don't take anything off the table. The fact of the matter is, if you've got a sympathizer with white supremacy, and you got someone who sitting on the court, and there are people sitting on the court, and in other federal business right now, who would not say the Brown versus Board of Education was the correct decision. There are people sitting in the court right now who would not just get rid of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, as has been done. They will reverse Brown v. Board of Education if given the opportunity to do so. And so if that kind of stuff come up, and there's some kind of a pattern developing on the court, and Joe Biden, the president, and seeing that kind of pattern developing that will take away health care from people, that will overturn Brown v. Board of Education and try to resegregate people in this country, then it may be time to take a look at the court to see whether or not there need to be some balance put back on the court.
Brother Seawright, do you share the congressman's opinion?
Let me back up for a second. Keep in mind, Donald Trump has made almost 200 appointments between the upper courts and lower courts since he's been in office. That includes 2 to the upper courts, and some of these lower court judges, they will be there for a lifetime. I would say this about what Joe Biden will have to inherit when he steps in on day one: the worst pandemic that has disproportionately impacted African Americans and in other communities in this country. Economic challenges we have not seen since 1932, and so forth. I don't know if that will be a top priority, or top discussion when he takes in office. But what I do know is getting appointments done to the lower court should be a real priority at some point for the Biden administration, but also not, as the boss said, not being closed door to any discussions around the courts, particularly that is the will of the people who sent him to the White House. I just know that there will be priorities on the agenda, and there will be things that are prioritized on the agenda. I think for day one, he's going to have to deal with the economy and this pandemic that will still be around us. Anything else that happens under his watch, I think will be gravy on the rice for the country, not just Democrats.
Indeed. One of the other things, Congressman Clyburn, while I have you, because I know you're super busy up there, I know both of you gentlemen are, and we thank you for what it is that you're doing and representing our church so well. Find it very interesting that Brother Jaime Harrison has a very good chance of winning the Senate seat over Lindsey Graham up in South Carolina. I know that I've also been supporting my Morehouse brother, Raphael Warnock, who's locked in a tight battle in Georgia with Kelly Loeffler, the Republican incumbent. With that, has it surprised you all that Jaime Harrison, a Democrat, has a good chance of representing the state of South Carolina in the United States Senate? Congressman Clyburn, I'll start with you, then I'll shift to Brother Seawright.
Yeah, I've been very surprised at how well Jaime has run this race. I don't know that there's anybody who would not be surprised that Jaime Harrison, young African-American in South Carolina, would raise $57 million in 1 quarter. That's more money than anybody's ever raised running for the United States Senate. Now, who would have thought a record like that would be broken by a young African-American from South Carolina running against an incumbent? I don't think so. That's a surprise to all of us. It's a pleasant surprise, however. As you probably know, I've known Jaime since he was an 11th grade student and started interning in my office right out of high school and came to work for me as my executive director when I became chair of the Democratic caucus. And I hired him to be my floor director when I became majority whip. I encouraged him when he said he wanted to come back home to run to be chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. He spent 4 years there, and he wasn't there just occupying space. He was developing a party. He has done a great job of developing the South Carolina party here. He started this fellowship program that he named in my honor, not because he felt so good about me, because he came to me to raise the money to finance the fellowship, which we did. All of that was building a foundation. And one thing you learn as not just as an AME, but if you're a Christian of any faith, when you say, upon this rock I'll build my church, that's talk about building upon a foundation. Jaime Harrison has built a foundation here in South Carolina that is going to pay off for the Democratic Party far out into the future. So he is demonstrating to everybody that if you build a foundation, you can be successful. So Jaime has already been successful politically. I just hope he can be successful senatorially.
Indeed. And Brother Seawright, just hold on 1 second, because I know that the congressman has another engagement that he will have to attend to. I want to ask you this one last question, Congressman Clyburn. With regards to our denomination, what should the AME Church be expecting starting January 20th, be it President Biden or if it is President Trump reelected? What type of things should our church body be looking for from a policy standpoint coming out of Congress, either with President Biden or President Trump?
Well, let me start with the Trump, please. If it's President Trump, I'm going to say what I've been saying for several days now. You don't have to worry about anything, AME Church. This democracy will have breathed its last breath. What we're going to have to worry about is whether or not there is the Constitution of the United States will get shredded, because that's what I think, where I think we're headed. So just remember, I told a group earlier today that I'm the 9th African American from South Carolina to serve in the United States Congress. The ninth. That means there were 8 before me. The only problem is there was 95 years between the 8th, George Washington Murray, and yours truly. George Washington Murray left Congress in 1897, and not a single black person got there from South Carolina until 1992 when I got elected. So if he is reelected, then I'll just say all of us should pray, because this country's democracy will have been shaken to its core. That's why you see all these people coming out here, these Republicans, these generals, all coming out against this man, and they're all saying the democracy is at stake. And so that's all you have to pray for after that. If it's a Biden candidacy, the very first thing he's got to do is to get his arms around this pandemic. That's what he's got to do. There's a third surge, according to all the experts, taking place as we speak. That means schools may be closing again. That means a lot of the school children will lose a second year of school. And then what will that leave the social order in this country? So the priority of a Biden administration has got to be get control of this pandemic, get us beyond this pandemic. The current president has already told you he's not interested in that. He's not interested in that simply because he's not interested in people being healthy. He's not interested in the society being healthy. He's not interested in the democracy. He sees himself as a strong man, as an autocrat. That word has been coming on all the airwaves this morning, referred to him as an autocrat. And that means one person rule. That's what he's all about. So you ain't have to worry about it if he gets reelected. All of us can get ready for the same thing we experienced from Jim Crow. When the troops came out of the South in 1877, we ushered in Jim Crow. And I'm going to say to all the people listening, Brother B. Hayes, who was the president that took the troops out of the South, Hayes became president of the United States by one vote. By one vote. Jim Crow became the law of this land by that one vote. And it lasted to 1954, from 1877 to 1954. You count, do the math. That's what we're headed for if this guy gets reelected. Just that simple.
Congressman Clyburn, thank you so much, not just for your wise political advice, but also your history lessons as well, sir. We wish you Godspeed in the days ahead, and I always look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Take care, Antjuan.
See you, boss.
Okay.
Antjuan, while I still have you, brother, I've got a few more questions that I'd like to follow up with you on. The congressman spoke about the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about what we could potentially see to ease the economic suffering from a Biden administration? I know there's been some talks here lately. I don't know if you saw where the rapper 50 Cent, I don't know whether he was trolling or serious, but he made the comments that he does not like the Biden tax plan. Where would that leave him? That has been a very interesting conversation on social media, to say the least, because once you have a chance to really look at the plan, you recognize that the Biden tax plan really is just going to reset pretty much status quo ante where it was under the Obama-Biden administration, and that the top tax earners or the top earners in the United States of America actually would bear more of a burden than those who are middle class or lower income. And again, I find it so interesting that so many middle class and or lower income people are flocking to what 50 Cent said and others about Biden talking about taxing people who earn in excess of $400,000 a year. With that in mind, what are some of the things, though, that we could expect from Joe Biden heading into next fall and from Congress to help ease this economic suffering where people have lost jobs, businesses have gone out, some of them are never coming back? What can we look forward to, brother?
Well, as it relates to 50 Cent, it's so disgusting. In fact, it's discouraging, because the communities that look like 50 Cent, or the communities that he would probably come from, would be tremendously hurt by not participating and voting for a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ticket. We've seen what a Trump policy agenda would look like. From a tax perspective, the Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell tax plan shifted the burden to middle and working class people and tried to hoodwink us as if it was going to benefit us. But in the long run, we are going to suffer in a real way and paying for the tax cuts that it ultimately benefited the rich. So when people like 50 Cent, Diddy, and so many of these other people decide to inject themselves in the political process without having a real grasp around what these things mean from a short-term and a long-term perspective, it only causes our community harm, because everyone doesn't pay attention the same way you and I do. And so all they hear is, oh, a rapper said he's doing XYZ 1, 2, 3, almost the Kanye West effect, not knowing that the devil's always in the details, and we get hurt and our communities get hurt for generations as it relates to them wanting what I would probably describe as attention. What can we expect from a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration on day one? I think, one, restoring some respect to the office. Two, I think you'll see Joe Biden attempt to work with the Congress, both the House and the Senate, regardless of the makeup, to try to get a stimulus bill injected into this economy so we can start whatever recovery process we can, depending on where we are in January when the next president is sworn in and what our numbers look like. The whip talked about this new wave, how that's going to impact schools, small businesses, in particular, small minority businesses. And we use that word minority very loosely, but I mean Black and brown businesses from our community, barbershop, beauty salons, restaurants, and so forth, things that really are the heart and center for us. I think figuring out a way to keep them alive and somewhat well is going to be a priority, but also making sure we have access to testing and dealing with some of the challenges because of the lack of access to healthcare in our communities because of how the Republicans have tried to handle this issue of healthcare. And I think, Chuck, you can't forget that a week after the election, the Supreme Court, in which Donald Trump and the Republicans will have a majority, will decide on the Affordable Care Act. And that's whether or not pre-existing conditions are protected and all the things that go along with the ACA. And I think we have to keep that in the forefront, that somehow or another, if things are taken out from the Affordable Care Act that will have consequences on our communities, I think Joe Biden and whatever the Congress look like is going to have to work on a healthcare agenda to restore some of that into law that the court ultimately rejected. And so I think you're going to see them block and tackle in real ways, but it's going to be met with challenges. Just like in 2008, when Barack Obama and Joe Biden were met with an economy that was shut down, numbers that were Great Depression numbers, he's going to walk into a similar situation. The only difference is it will not be he and Barack Obama. It'll be he and Kamala Harris. I really feel strongly about a Democratic House. Hopefully we'll keep voting the ways we have and we'll have a Democratic Senate. And I think we can get back on track. If we don't, then he's going to have to be able to work in a bipartisan manner, which I feel really good that Joe Biden can do in order to get a deal done that will help people from getting evicted, save their health care, restore small businesses, keep minority businesses going, how to help schools deal with not having access to internet and all the things that come along with this pandemic.
Indeed, brother. And with that, I also want to add to your analysis with regards to 50 Cent, in regards to Diddy. There was a huge issue last week with regards to O'Shea Jackson, better known as Ice Cube, the rapper / actor. And, one of my thoughts on it, Brother Seawright, is that I didn't have a problem with one of the notions that Ice Cube had, which is, and he's talked about this a little bit over the last few months, which is the need to engage both parties. I think that makes sense, particularly down here in the solid South, where most of the states of the old Confederacy are Republican, solidly Republican in the state legislatures. So there are times that Black advocacy groups, be it the NAACP or other legislative groups, have to engage with Republicans to be able to make sure that things that are pertinent to our communities are addressed on a statewide level. However, there's a difference between saying we are engaging with Republicans during off election years or during months, as opposed to showing up 6-8 weeks out and saying, hey, we should hijack the black vote and hold it hostage until we know for sure as to what Donald Trump or Joe Biden are going to do for black people, when in fact, Joe Biden had a plan that had been out for 6-7 months prior. There is evidence that Ice Cube, along with a number of other celebrities, had been invited to come and sit and talk with Senator Kamala Harris about those specific plans, and that Ice Cube blew off those meetings and then all of a sudden now wants to get all of the shine. And unfortunate for him, once the microscope, he was under the microscope, he really showed himself not studied to be approved, so to speak, in regards to the issues that he was championing. But still, just like you just said, Brother Seawright, there are still a number of brothers in particular, some black women too, but there are a whole lot of brothers who they love Ice Cube so much that when Ice Cube said he has problems with Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, they too are saying, well, I've got problems with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as well. And there are some projections that from 13 to 20% of black men could potentially vote for Donald Trump next week. What are your thoughts about that?
So many, Chuck. Let me just say this. No matter what differences we may think we have with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they do not compare to the differences we should all have with Donald Trump, Mike Pence, and the Republican Party. Secondly, I'll share with you what I learned growing up in the AME Church, growing up in my parents' household, and learning from my sharecropping grandmothers. When you have a family disagreement, you deal with it in the house, and you do
Amen.
not take it outside of the house. Ice Cube, Ice Pick, 50 Cent, 60 Cent, Diddy, any of these people who all of a sudden want this political attention 3 weeks out from the election. If they had issues with Joe Biden, if they had issues with Kamala Harris, they could have easily set up a meeting. I know they were reached. There was outreach to them. They could have made a call, sent a text, email, even a smoke signal to have a meeting to figure out what those differences are, not to air it out on social media or to get an interview. And I think that speaks to kind of where they are and where I think a lot of people are. And if we really peel back the onion and take a real bite, we'll know that any plan that Donald Trump and Mike Pence has developed when it comes to a policy agenda has and will continue to raise harm on our communities. When they were cutting housing budgets at HUD, cutting after school programs, trying to push for privatizing schools in this country, all those things we saw that have come from this administration, you can't find a reasonable person to say that that will be beneficial to communities that look like ours or from the ones that you and I come from or the ones that most AME churches sit in. So this idea that these people have in their minds about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are so bad, and yet they say Donald Trump and Mike Pence are so good, I have to wonder where their heart is. I have to wonder where their conscience is. Because here's the same man who said, go back to where you come from, S-hole countries, told NFL athletes, fire the SOBs, criticize people for taking a knee because black and brown people were being killed, question the idea that how dare we complain or we protest when we're getting killed by white cops for no reason. This is the president of the United States. And God knows some of the things we said about people like Kamala Harris, Oprah Winfrey, and others, cuddling with white supremacists, i.e. saying it's good sides, good people on both sides when it comes to Charlottesville. I mean, I can go on and on and on until next Sunday about the things that have been harmful or toxic to black communities from Donald Trump. And here we have black men, a consequential constituency in every election, going out on a limb, flirting with the Trump agenda. It baffles me. Yes, 13% of black men did vote for Donald Trump in 2016. I've been spending all of my time around this country since 2016, raising the alarm, having these conversations, trying to figure out how do we meet black men where they are so we can get to where we need to be, not just as a party, but as a community. Guess what? A lot of the stuff that black men have digested around the country of why they say they may have voted for Donald Trump or set out the election is really not even factual information. When you start talking about the 94 crime bill and some of the stuff I hear from some of these black men in these intimate conversations we have, I have to say to myself, guys, My people perish due to the lack of knowledge. Do your research. That was one of the most used talking points when it comes to foreign interference in our elections by the Russians. Why? Because they know it's going to get a response in the favor of Donald Trump from low propensity voters. And so I think that we all have a role to play, obviously, in every election, but we have to really educate ourselves on these issues. And we cannot just follow the leader because we see a rapper or someone doing what they do and we feel like the system of government has not worked for us. We have to really do our research and think about these things and think these things through. If the majority of people on my street are not crossing the street because it's a red light, and I see one or two people running across the street, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna stop to think about why the majority of people are not crossing the street at the red light. And I think if we take that approach, perhaps we can push back on some of this foolishness we hear from some of these people who have no idea what real people in our communities are going through.
The red light, green light analogy is a good one. I'm going to have to co-opt that one. It's a future
You're welcome to
discussion.
use it.
I appreciate it. I will make sure that I attribute it properly to you. With that, I have one last question for you, good brother, this afternoon. And that is, the very first Trump-Biden debate was a disaster by all, objective indicators. The second one did not happen because President Trump developed the coronavirus. And so there were some issues with whether it would be in person or not. And so there was the town hall format. Both had competing town halls on the same night last week. We are set to have the third, it'll be the second, but would have been the third debate tomorrow evening. And the debate commission has already put out some parameters. There are some discussions that the mics might be muted at some point in time, but a muted mic still can't stop someone from yelling and screaming if they are bound and determined to yell and scream. Two quick questions. Do you think that there should be a third debate? Should Vice President Biden and or Donald Trump say, you know what, why are we even going through the motions with this? And if so, do you anticipate that the candidates will be able to get into substance tomorrow night? Or do you anticipate that it will be just like the very first debate where there will be a lot of yelling and screaming?
Yes, there should be a third debate. It will give the 13 to 15% of people who are undecided for whatever reason in this country an opportunity to see both candidates on stage side by side, hearing their closing arguments one last time to the American people, not just the people who show up at their rallies or their events. I'm excited because we have a black woman moderating a presidential debate for the first time in I forget how many years, Chuck. That's a monumental thing, knowing the historical role of women being on the front line, but also just women having a seat at the table and not being on the menu. My friend Christian, I wish her all the best. And for every critic who will find their way to the keyboard and attempt to attack her tomorrow night or not, nights after, I'll be praying for you because there's no need or nor is there any oxygen for that in this particular environment. I suspect that Donald Trump will lean into what's comfortable for him. That's anger, frustration, confusion, and lies. He's done that in every debate he has had on the presidential stage, even as a candidate in 2016. He attempted to do it in the first debate. He did it in the town hall format, the competing town hall. I suspect his strategy will not change. What I think Joe Biden has to do is to not focus on Donald Trump, not get lured into that. He has to look directly into the eyes of the American people and speak directly to their hearts, into their spirits, and to their issues. Donald Trump would try to draw him into a personality battle. I think he has to have a policy discussion. Most people who are watching that debate, their minds have already made up. A majority of them have already voted. A lot of them know who they're going to vote for and how they feel about both candidates. But there are people who are looking for confirmation. There are people who are undecided, and there are people who are looking for a reason to believe. And believe it or not, there will be people who are thinking about sitting this election out. And tomorrow night will determine their posture and their position about politics in general in this election. And I also think that Joe Biden has to remind people what's at stake in this election. It's not just he and Kamala Harris. It will be candidates up and down the ballot, i.e. the Jaime Harrisons of the world, Pastor Warnock, and others that will literally make decisions about the next 30 or 40 years in this country. That has to be front and center.
With that, brother, I thank you always. Enjoy the conversation. I know that we will be talking a lot more in the days ahead and even after the election. So Godspeed to you as well over the course of the next few days, Brother Seawright.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate your friendship, my man.
Always, brother. And with that, I'd like to thank you, the viewers, who have had an opportunity to listen to the words of political strategist Antjuan Seawright and House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn. And I want to also let you know that the next TCR dialogue will be on October the 23rd, discussing the documentary Rigged with Mac Heller, Jackie DuPont Walker, and Reverend Cassandra Gould. We will also host a special screening of the film on the TCR Facebook page at 7 p.m. Eastern, and that will be on October the 23rd. You can support The Christian Recorder by buying a subscription for $36 a year. Visit www.thechristianrecorder.com. Again, that's www.thechristianrecorder.com. Also, please support the AME Church Publishing House for your church, school, and worship needs. Featured product is the Empowerment Syllabus. Visit www.amecpublishing.com. Again, that's www.amecpublishing.com. Our sponsors today have been Reverend Marvin C. Zanders for Bishop 2021, and Reverend Sylvester Beeman for Bishop 2021 also. We'd like to thank both of those gentlemen. And now for our closing PSA.
When you think about power, think about voting. When you move to protect those you love.
All right, with that, we were waiting on our closing PSA, but
when you think about power, think about voting. When you move to protect those you love, add voting to your list. When you act to eliminate injustice, join AME The Alert. Get your friends, family, neighbors, church members, and all to vote. It's our time. Hashtag join AME The Alert.
again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And if you have not voted already, you have 6 days left. Get it done. Take care and God bless.